which actually started in CNT, where whether you do Karunashraya, which we kept on adding things to it. Recently doing this municipal schools, which some of these larger schools, they take them over and look after them. So you do those kind of things, with equal passion, and
as important.
So those are the things, are something which, to whatever possible intervention, to whatever scale you would do it, may not be at a changing the entire landscape of the city.
No, that's not what one is expecting. But do you all, for instance, I mean, this is a very personal question, but is there I think Kuke mentioned it, or Swapnil, somebody, is there a certain thing that you do pro bono for?
What I was talking about is pro bono.
Okay. Right.
You would not like to say it, but you would do these kind of projects all the time.
Yeah.
With the same amount of passion. I mean, there should not be. It won't be treated as a different project, which we kept on doing it. It's in CNT, and we continue to do it all the time. And I think all of them do it.
And I'm glad that we don't know, because it's not been through a megaphone, that such things are happening and people don't know. Other than the fact that many people are doing things which are falling apart, but they think that they're doing things to the city. So I mean, I guess there are different ways of doing it. Prem?
Yeah, but one does things in different ways. Some things you do through the practice. Through the practice, you always try to look at the context of your project. You don't just look at your site in isolation. So in that ways, where one is aware of what impact a project is having on the city. One does it in other ways. For me, it's through writing, through activism.
Yeah.
And those are more directly aimed at the city. But I'd like to mention a third aspect, which I think has to do with the roots of CNT. And actually, there's a practice older than CNT, which was the one started by my father. And his first large project he got was HMT Pinjore, which is just outside Chandigarh. And between the years of, I think, 1958 and 1961, he was spending almost an equal amount of time in Chandigarh as, now that's a really historically loaded time to be in Chandigarh, right? And especially if you look at the fact that Corbusian idiom established in Chandigarh affected a generation of work up till the 1970s in Indian architecture. And I was always curious as to why my father never had, at any moment went along with that Corbusian idiom, even though he was right in the eye of the storm. And if he had affinity to one of the masters, it was more to right than to Chandigarh. But then in researching that, in going into anecdotal histories of CNT, I found that the impulse was very different. It was not like that first generation of post-independence architects who were seeking to put forward the symbols of what this newly independent modern nation was, and saw the Corbusian idiom as a language in which to do that. Those kind of grand impulses were not there in CNT. And I've written about this. I call it the architecture of the background, where it was actually completely different. It was a more contextual, modest, which is why none of us speak through megaphones that way, where you use your practice to earn the affection of the community within which you practice. That becomes a primary impulse. And you have to create an architecture which also earns that affection. So to me, that's also a way of making the city, of building community. That through your practice you're building community. It's very modest, but I think it's very significant.
I'm seeing that now. I was sifting through a whole lot of drawings. I don't know how many of them for some exhibition, and it's quite incredible that younger architects who are in their late 20s, early 30s, are now, I don't know if I mentioned it in my in the opening statement, but they are now almost looking at a different epoch, yeah, another time of engagement. And they are going like I said, no, this rural-urban thing, that they're going and working within communities and creating with their own people, their own materials and their own skills, incredible spaces of interaction. Leaving, like you said, because that thing came to my mind again because of working within a community. And that is what you give as a gift to, you wanted to say something? Okay.
Yeah, actually, sorry, it's about your last question, actually, about the collaboration. Mohe and all you guys have been actually a mentor. Thanks for that. And then I don't think actually we are not collaborating, first thing, actually, because somewhere or the other we keep discussing actually our projects with Mohe, or we keep seeing his projects, and actually that's one thing. Second thing is actually, should we collaborate at all? Because actually, you know, when I joined CNT, Mohe gave me a book called Zen and Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. Actually, if we start discussing or working together all the time, we hit the same thing, and then actually, you know, we do the same thing again and again, actually. So should that happen? Actually, you know, that's just a question. I'm not actually concluding anything. For your present question, actually, we designed this a small house in 16 feet by 40 feet, a very, very small house, actually, way back in 2004, little earlier than that. And actually, once in a while, I suddenly get this call actually from him and say that actually I went to one housewarming ceremony, 18 kilometers from here, went up to 18th floor and saw a very small house, which is totally uninteresting. So I talked about my house. You know, actually, the point that I'm trying to make is if we try to work sincerely, somewhere or the other, actually, some scale, I know that the scale is very small, actually, it gets percolated into, I don't know how much change that can bring in, but it does happen, actually. But actually, our practices are, me and Collage right now, our practices are too small to make difference, actually, at the city level. Actually.
That's the reason why these collaborations on projects, like, I mean, Mohe passed on a project to you or to Swapnil, I don't know. So
He has done that to everyone, actually.
yeah. No, so what I'm saying is when larger projects come, that was a question now which has already gone stale, whether collaboration at that level could happen. Because, you know, it used to happen earlier. So that's why when somebody asked me, I said, hey, I must put it across to you guys. Can we open it up now, maybe to the audience? Is there somebody who wants to? But anyway, one thing I have to say, because I don't see that there are any questions here, is that when one saw these two very distinct approaches, I think they were distinct. I mean, that can be debatable. I like to say it as a scientific temper and the artistic temper, but that doesn't mean that artistic is devoid from your work. Of course not, because the work, I mean, the way light has worked in your spaces is quite magical, you know. I think in your spaces it was section, interaction between the verticality of a building and bringing in light. And I think more important, I think you worked a lot more with landscape. Yours, the first one was a tree, when you said you will stop but didn't, you know, with that. It was, so there seems to have been, I think, the intention of this mapping trajectories, an absolute sort of continuum in a sense, you know, that you all didn't stop from being inspired, but obviously became your own men. And if there is nobody else to, okay, yeah. Somebody else had a question? Yeah.
If I can just 1 sec respond to. Actually, I strangely saw the work in the opposite interpretation.
I'm glad. I'm glad.
I saw Kuke's work as artistic because it was very idiosyncratic in the way it put together, you know, collages of detail and craftsmanship. Whereas Swapnil had a much more, I wouldn't call it, go so far as to call it scientific, but I mean, in fact, he used the word consistency. as a value, and the consistency of the atrium as an ordering element in section was fairly systematic in the projects.
No, when I say scientific, of course, I'm talking about the detail. I mean, the detailing that came out of his work was not the sort of detailing you see very often.
But to me, that was very tactile. It wasn't scientific.
No, well, tactile, not all the time. But I think you need to have a scientific mind to do all that. What was that thing called?
The last one was totally scientific.
The thing, and there was quite a bit of it.
The study table.
Yeah. The movement, the things that are, you know, the hinging, the rotation, you know, it had more of that. So
even
Swapnil's,
that gate
yeah,
handle is also.
Swapnil's space, I mean, his thing traveled through space. Yours did as well. But you see, these are small little overlaps. I think yours goes more towards that than his did, and his, that sort of thing. I mean, I'm not giving definitions here, but it's just a feeling. Yeah, Gunjan?
So this is a question to both Prem and Sanjay. I mean, I know we all enjoyed watching the work of Kuke and Swapnil, but what is your critique? Is this what you expected? Are you surprised with what they are doing now? Considering you all have been their mentors.
If I wasn't surprised, I would be disappointed. I'm very glad that they have the ability to continue to surprise.
Yeah, well said.
Well, I think for me, they are, even though theoretically they are not part of Mindspace, or they are almost in touch on weekly basis. So they keep sharing what they do and keep, interacting. So for me, it cannot be surprise. It's a continuation of the process, and I think that's one thing which we learned, that once we work together, we are like part of the family. Some of them sitting here. And one advantage of being bachelor is if I keep getting some fish curry, from and not from Kuke, get some halwa. Even today he has got it. So that's something, that connection keeps goes on. Just one thing I wanted to add, which was very, very interesting, that it was base time, and in CNT studio, when I would work on some of these projects, I had this habit of pinning the drawings in front, and or either plan sections. And usually after 6:30 and all of them would get together. And this used to be a ritual in CNT. Kuke, Tushar, Sudhakar, Shankar, then Medappa, and later on, Sapnil. So that used to be a session of learning where, you would keep criticizing whatever sketch you would have done, and why can't it be this way? Why? And unfortunately, because of the age difference, whatever I put up on a pinup board, nobody questions it now, which is really unfortunate. But those were the times which we learned so much, and then next day you would change it, and so all you guys, youngsters, I think this is something which is a very, very important process in the studio, where you put the sketch, allow it to be criticized, and you start, next day you put another one, and so that used to be one great learning process.
Actually, interestingly, Mohi explained everything, but then just before this presentation, I was actually talking to one of my colleagues, and I just wanted to actually, get something out of them, what I should be presenting and things like that. So one of the questions to her was actually asked her, so we work on details and all that so much. Do you think that is important? Actually, the way she answered was actually, yes, it is. But how long that is going to stay? Meaning, should you really spend so much time actually in detailing or working so much? Because, first thing is, there is our life. The second thing is, the projects that we're going to build is it going to stay that long that you've spent so much time? So actually, I didn't, I mean, actually they're partly true. What they're saying is true, but for me, actually what I think we are doing is right, and it is an addiction, actually. We keep on doing that. So that's how youngsters are thinking, I think, actually.
Just want to answer your question, whether I feel proud or whatever. Of course, I feel proud, but we used to always refer to one office. That was Peter Behren's office. And that office, we used to always refer to it during base group time. That's the office where Walter Gropius, Miss Van Rohe, and Corbusier all worked together. And it was in, I think, 1908, and then 1910, Corbusier joined. And none of them knew that they are going to be so great masters. And when we used to go in Contractors Club and sit and drink, we used to talk about that office, and then we used to compare CNT. So no wonder they have become great.
No, actually one thing he used to say, like, well, he used to take us to Contractors Club and talk to us, and then actually he'll say, I see one of you becoming Lee Corbusier or somebody. So,
I mean, I have a question. I know everyone is in a very happy mood, and after Gunjan's, it's gone in a different direction. But as a landscape architect, I just looked at a lot of the projects, and I said there was not a mention of climate. There was no mention of climate change. There's nothing on environment, and very little on landscape. I mean, a lot of the houses talked about light, talked about a courtyard, but I didn't see much landscape. And I think it's lacking. And architects sometimes feel they're doing a lot with landscape because they put some plants, but the actual interaction of the outside and the inside gets lost. I mean, there's a lot of shadow, play of light. That seems to be the romance in architecture. But there's not much in terms of landscape. And that's quite unfortunate.
so actually, do you expect us to answer that?
I think you should answer that.
Okay, actually, first thing is the house that I live in, our office, and most of the houses that we have designed actually has no fans also. Forget about air conditioning, actually. So we do actually have, I mean, all of us in the background of mind, like climate change and all that, actually, that do, I mean, as I said, actually, I don't want to present projects as projects, actually, first thing. Second thing is the projects that we work on in our studio, actually, they're all very small projects. I prefer to do small projects, actually, where actually, see, if you look at our office, the studio, the canopy of trees that we talked about, the borrowed view, which we learned from IIICOS when we were working, actually, those were the words that I picked up, actually. We do think of that, but actually, it's not that you are working on acres and acres of space, actually. No.
No, I think you can still achieve it in a small space.
Let me try.
And so I never got influenced by anybody. And it just happened in my life that things started moving around. My question to both the youngsters, this influence which we are talking about, does it remain with you throughout your life? Or does it get diluted? Or does the time comes in your life that you feel that influence is enough, now I am on my own?
I'll answer this. I've not been speaking for long. I think when you work with someone for long, like for 7 years, and when you come out, your foundations are set. So the way you start your design, probably the way you look at the project to find a solution, they are set. But eventually what happens over a period of time is that you start developing your own language, your own vocabulary. And how you do it is probably you add layers of yourself into it. And I think that's something which we all would probably agree, whoever's worked in CNT and whoever's started a practice. there's a sense of layers which have happened, and it's in probably in a progression. So you keep seeing it from 2009 for us to what you see now. There's definitely a change in the way we look at a project, but our base has remained the same. And I think that's something which has really worked because there's clarity in terms of starting a project.
So you're saying the process remains the same?
Yeah.
No, I remember asking Sanjay many years ago, you might have forgotten, because you always get something from everybody. You get lots, you get little, whatever it might be. So I asked him once, what was the single most important thing you got from Pacey Thacker, CNT? And he had a wonderful answer. Yeah. He says he taught me what design integrity meant. You remember that? And design integrity, I think, is at the base of this. And when they're talking about what they got, I mean, I think they shared, continue to share, and make it their own, this thing about design integrity. I think integrity is a very important word because it is it doesn't exist anymore. Integrity doesn't matter. You can go on this side of the road or that side of the road, it doesn't matter because integrity is gone out of the window. So I'm glad that there is a strong sense of that in these four. And that, it's very difficult to take out of.
Yeah, I think
Now-
that's what they all, I mean, as I said, they're more than being, and he was quite just in, more than being a good architect or doing good designs, what we learned from them is to be a good human being. Yeah, I think that's something which I would take back in my long, as I do.
But that I think you get from much earlier. Not all, but most get from much earlier. I think it got really matured like a good bottle of wine in CNT.
I think, I'm glad you mentioned the word integrity. In fact, I wrote a piece that is on my blog trying to lay out some foundations on which you critique your own work. And I define 4: integrity, empathy, emancipation, and transcendence. But to get back to your question of influence, that's a word one I treat very carefully because it seems to suggest a sort of linear trajectory, that things are, something started and then it shaped something and something naturally was a consequence of that. It's actually not that. Trajectories are actually back and forth and they can twist and turn in that back and forth. It's actually a conversation and the authenticity of the conversation that happens. One of the statements I've been thinking about a lot recently is the famous statement by Louis Kahn where he says, great architecture starts with the unmeasurable, goes through measurable means when it is being designed, and in the end must be unmeasurable. And I puzzled about that because that statement was asking me to recognize the unmeasurable, which seemed like a contradiction in terms. But then it occurred to me that a lot of what we feel, to strike the resonance with just being a good human being, a lot of what we feel creates a value in life, whether it is beauty, joy, wonder, love, reverence, anything. All of these things are undefinable, they are unmeasurable, but we know them as tangible reality when we experience them. So actually what is happening is a continuous back and forth conversation where you're retreating within yourself through your experience to know that unmeasurable, because you cannot, it's beyond your capacity to talk about. But then you validate that internal exploration with something that someone else is doing to say whether are they seeing that same echo. And that's a continuous process and it's non-linear. You can't say where it will lead you. But that continuous back and forth between internal introspection and external validation of the intensity of the conversation. And the conversation can be with another person, it can be with a piece of wood, it can be with many things. And I think, actually, if you come to the core of it, the humanity that was emphasized in the CNT culture was actually creating a space, a sheltered space for that kind of a conversation to happen.
Okay, I think we should close now, but I want to leave with you all a quote. You know, most of my references don't come from architects or architecture. They come from other disciplines, which have, of course, like I keep saying, a very strong bearing on what we do and how we are inspired. And this comes from literature. And I think why I ponder over it for very, very long. I read the book, I saw the film, I still ponder over it. And it's paradoxes contained in it, you know. And that is the resolution of the paradoxes. Actually, that's the bottom of what our life's all about. So I'll just read this. And it says as much about architecture as it says about the nature of man. And there are many ways you can interpret it. So we won't get into any discussion here. It's just something I want to leave you with before you hit the bar. Then you'll forget it anyway. So, my lifetime ambition has been to unite the utmost seriousness of question with the utmost lightness of form. And like a good shairi, I will repeat that sentence again. My lifetime ambition has been to unite the utmost seriousness of question with the utmost lightness of form. And this is not just an artistic ambition. The combination of a sparse form and a serious subject immediately unmasks the truth about our dramas and their awful insignificance. Only then we are able to experience the unbearable lightness of being. Think about it. It says a lot about us all, good things and bad. And I think sometimes we ourselves have to go through another process of change before we can expect the architecture to be for all, for everybody. Because still we all know that architects only service, if that's the correct word, I'm sorry to use it, probably 10% of our population. And anybody wants to be asked who that great man is who said it? He was a Nobel laureate, Milan Kundera. And I would suggest you read the book and see the movie. They're both exceptional.
Can I share one last quote, since I also borrow from literature? And this I think is very tied to the theme of this evening, and it is from...
Mine wasn't?
Also.
The important word.
Yeah. And this is from the Austrian poet Rainer Maria Rilke. And he said, "And still, it is not enough to have memories. One must be able to forget them when they are many. And one must have the great patience to wait until they come again. For it is not yet the memories themselves, not until they have turned to blood within us, to glance, to gesture, nameless and no longer to be distinguished from ourselves. Not until then can it happen that in a most rare hour, the first word of a verse arises in their midst and goes forth from them."
Germanic tradition is always to have the word blood. Actually, this can go on the whole night. But I have to talk about blood in the context of architecture. It's very interesting because when Charles Correa finished the Champalimaud Center for the Unknown in Lisbon, I think 3 days before the opening, he slipped and fell and hurt himself badly enough to bleed and to be in a wheelchair. And at the opening, you had the president of Portugal, you had all the architects and literateurs and everybody. And one actually bold guy gets up and says, "Mr. Correa, I don't know whether I should be thanking you for the blood that you spilt on our building. But in the old and ancient pagan tradition, that is how every building is open.
I suppose it's that or a broken pumpkin. uh, I'd like you to please stay on stage. We have some thank yous. Thank you for your generosity to share with us. It was really, really an inspiring evening. If I could call Navnath Kande sir, if you could just come and help us to give thank yous on behalf of IIID, Gunjan Das, and of course on behalf of our hosts. I don't see Amrit here, if he's around. Yeah.